Welcome to the October edition of the Cinetopia radio show and podcast. I'm Amanda, your host, and we have a busy film-packed episode this month. This month's team reviews 3 films currently out or coming soon to cinemas. Megalopolis, Francis Ford Coppola's latest film, Joker, Folie à Deux, directed by Todd Phillips and starring Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga, and finally, The Taste of Mango, a debut feature documentary film by Chloe Abrams that will be coming out in theaters on the 15th of November. We also have some great interviews this month. First, I sit down with Wang, director of Queer East Festival, which is coming to Edinburgh this week at the Cameo Cinema from the 17th to the 21st of October. Then I talk to a few organizations who are part of the Local Cinema Project, which is a collection of community cinema events happening all across Edinburgh this autumn. So we're talking specifically with Morvern Cunningham, the organizer of the project, Tomas Gerrard from Deaf Action Film Club, and Hollie Ruddick from the Crannie Community Hub. Finally, I talked to Blair Young, who's the co-director of Since Yesterday, The Untold Story of Scotland's Girl Bands, a film coming out this weekend but made its world premiere as part of this year's Edinburgh International Film Festival. All on this show, so stay tuned. There's quite a lot going on in the next few weeks for cinema in Edinburgh and beyond, and a few highlights from us. On the 23rd of October, we are collaborating with the Short Com Film Fest to show at the Edinburgh premiere of Silent Men, Edinburgh-based documentary filmmaker Duncan Cowell's first feature film, which did quite well at Sheffield Doc-Fest this year. You can catch this poignant yet funny film on Wednesday, 23rd October at Cameo Cinema, 8:15 p.m. There'll be a Q&A with Duncan, moderated by Sonia Henrici, so come along and join us. And 2 days later, we're joining the Edinburgh Short Film Festival on their opening night and running our monthly networking night at Summerhall Courtyard, starting a bit early so you can network with colleagues and film industry professionals, but then hopefully stay to see their program. Then over the weekend, we'll be running a pop-up bar at the French Institute for the next 2 Edinburgh Short Film Festival programs happening that weekend. So come early, have a drink, meet some new film friends, and watch some great short films from all over the world. You can find out all about their program on their website at edinburghshortfilmfestival.com. Welcome to the October edition of the Cinetopia radio show and podcast. I'm here with 2 of our regulars, Kat and Clara. So how are you both?
I'm nauseated, Amanda.
We've had quite a journey to get here this evening.
In a literal sense.
We're dedicated to cinema. But the mood lighting is in the EHFM studio, and tunes are outside, and it feels good. It feels good to be talking about cinema. How are you, Kat?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm ready. I'm ready to talk about all the films. I'm filmed up. That's how I feel today.
So we've picked some powerfully interesting films to talk about. Powerful and somewhat disturbing.
Yes.
All of them, a little bit.
Divisive.
Right. Yes. Controversial.
Powerful.
Yeah. So 3 films. And it's Megalopolis, Joker of Folie à Deux. Is that right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And The Taste of Mango. Both, almost all are out, and The Taste of Mango will be coming out in November. So let's get started.
Don't let the now destroy the forever.
One filmmaker has always been ahead of his time.
Time, stop! Go.
Now, from visionary writer and director Francis Ford Coppola, comes an event nothing can prepare you for.
Imagine today's society as a branch of civilization about to reach a dead end. Is this way we're living the only one that's available to us? My plan is a city that people can dream about.
Megalopolis.
What about those standing in your way?
Power to the people!
Who like it the way it is?
People don't need dreams. People need help now.
Don't let the now destroy the forever.
We're in need of a great great debate about the future. Enjoy the show.
1, 2, 3. Yippee yay.
So yes, the first one we're going to review is Megalopolis, because it's been out the longest, and it's quite a film that people have been talking about for a while. It's also not getting as much marketing for various reasons, and has quite a lot of like a massive cast. And Clara, what is this film? If you can describe it in a little bit of a few words.
That is a difficult task. Unsurprisingly, but I volunteered for this, so here we go. So, Megalopolis centers around the conflict between Caesar, a genius artist who seeks to leap into a utopian and idealistic future, and his opposition, Mayor Franklin Cicero, who remains committed to a regressive status quo, perpetuating greed, special interests, and partisan warfare. It's loosely based on the Catalan conspiracy to overthrow the Roman Republic in 63 BC. And it's also about the downfall and the evolution of American imperialism, utopianism, political intrigue and rot, and much more, Coppola argues, but I'm going to leave it there, because that's what I think.
Yeah. And I'll just go with you, Kat. Tell us what you thought about this film. I feel we almost sat through...
We don't know what we all think about it yet, is what's fun to point out. So
I know.
So we have I have no idea if either of you love it or hate it, so this is going to be really fun.
Yeah. And it has been... it has, you know, when it premiered at Cannes, it was like people were, this is the worst film or the best film. We didn't know what to expect, but now we do. And Kat, what was your thoughts?
Well, I feel really neutral about it. Oh, maybe that's even worse than sometimes you want a film, you want to feel something. Yeah, exactly. And I literally, that's two of my main notes. I think every time I watch a film, I want it to do two things, or at least one of them, for me to feel like, it's done its thing. So the first one is it has to make me feel something, or it has to be saying some sort of like message. So the first one, message, no. Not for me. Yeah. Firmly no. Probably no. And then in terms of feeling anything, equally no. So that leaves me... I think what was striking about it was the visuals and how just stunning it was. And I really, as someone who loves like colours and textures, I was very I was happy to be there just for that. And I think it's got that kind of epic scale. But then by the end of it, I think in the last kind of 20 minutes, I was like, I'm done. Because it wasn't really progressing, like in terms of the narrative and how the story developed, I just wasn't engaged enough. Yeah, and I think because it runs just over 2 hours, you need something there. I like to read the comments and the trailers on YouTube. Yeah, just to see what people are saying. And someone said, "Go and watch that because, like, obviously there's quite mixed reviews and all that stuff, but go and watch it." Because, like, you need to make up your own mind. And I'm like, I like that because, why not? And I think it is worth just seeing in the cinema. Like, it's definitely not a film that you would ever enjoy on, like, a TV or your laptop or whatever. So I'm glad that I did see it. But again, it's that weird neutrality that, like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm a little bit like you, I think. I didn't hate it. So that's first and foremost. I felt it was quite dated. Like, it felt like a film. Yeah. And if you know the history, and we talked a little bit about it a couple months ago when we were talking about Cannes, but he's been trying to make this film since like 1984, 4 years, something like that. And the cast has changed and switched around a lot. And then by the time he was able to make it, nobody will market it or distribute it across various countries. So he's had a real challenge for that. So because I watched the whole press in Cannes, and I wanted to like this more than I did. And I also was sitting next to someone who's a huge Francis Ford Coppola fan, and I like Tim. I like his. I like Apocalypse Now, but come on, not all of his films. So I wasn't expecting much. So the fact that I could actually there was a narrative, there was something going on, was like more than I expected.
The bar is so low.
But I feel like I would be trying to like it more if I said much more than that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Claire, I have a lot to say.
Okay.
So my first note initially, just to set the tone, is Megalopolis, which I did not coin. I wish I did. I went through an emotional cycle while watching this film. I really did. So I went in completely cold, not knowing anything. I've been told it was about the fall of the American Empire, loosely based on the fall of the Roman Empire, and about utopianism. But that's all I really knew. But anyway, the emotional cycle I went through was initially rage, because for the first about 30 minutes, I was actually pretty furious that so much money had been poured into something like this, and for actually genuinely, I remember very vividly feeling that it made me feel like I don't like movies anymore.
Oh,
you know, when you watch a really brilliant film, you're like, wow, the art of cinema is the one of the highest arts ever achieved by mankind. That was the opposite feeling which I had from watching this movie. But then when I expressed that irritation that so much money had been spent on it, almost 120 million, I think was the figure. I was reminded that it's his own money. It is the biggest self-own flop possible. So I shouldn't just really be just joining the fun. But
also, I mean, if on that thought, I mean, if he could have kept all that money and given it to like his two or three children, but instead he spent it all on a whole bunch of people.
Also, he dedicated this to his dying wife, which is such a burn. He was spending all his time and money on this, and then he dedicated to her, and I was just like, it's pretty harsh, I think. I thought it was pretty sassy. Maybe she liked it. Maybe she loved it, and both delusional together. Like, maybe Folie together.
I think she's a really interesting. I only know a lot of this again through our colleague Emma, but like I think she's a really interesting character because she made the documentary about Apocalypse Now as well.
So she did,
and a great woman within the Coppola dynasty. Yeah. So I do think they had a great love affair, and I think that was
maybe that was dedicated to me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But he loved. I mean, he was persevering through all of this.
Another reason why I was sort of burning up at the beginning was because I knew all the Coppola fans would be loving it no matter what.
Yeah,
and I was just bracing myself to have to read all the kind of like all the chat and all the criticism from all the dudes who are like, you just don't get it. You know what? The detractors are just merely not intellectual. Like, what's to get is the thing. So I watched hours of Coppola interviews, by the way, before this. Luckily, my criticisms have been kind of like backed up by his interviews. So, for example, there's one critic who is so earnest but also so sycophantic who's interviewing Coppola, and he mentions a lot of these interviews are sort of opportunities for people to say, like, look how much I understood it, director, like, please see how you recognise me. And the interviewer is talking about breaking the fourth wall, and how interesting that is in Coppola. I shit you not, he turned in and goes like, what's the fourth wall? Like, what is it? He's just said he described himself as a theatre person, which is one of the defences for why this film is so bafflingly staged and why it is the way it is that he's a theatre person and he doesn't know what the fourth wall is. The interviewer sort of giving him reasons and sort of like highbrow excuses for the film, and then him going like, yeah, that sounds good, I'll go with that, and just kind of going.
I can see how that would, like, I think that's why I got a little bit rageful towards the end of that film, because I didn't really have any expectations, which I think is also a little bit problematic in itself, like especially if you look at somebody like Coppola, who's this massive filmmaker, and then somebody, we will discuss the director of Taste of Mango, who's, just kind of had her debut and stuff, and the kind of expectations that you attach to that name going into it, and whether then you kind of go, well, I guess, as you were saying, Amanda, like, if you talk more about it, then you're kind of giving it more credit than it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
And is that something that we should be doing? I think it's an interesting conversation there as well. But yeah, like, I really hate when films make me feel like I'm a dumb person who doesn't understand what, that there's something more to it. But I think with this one, I just didn't feel that there was. I was just like, I just don't think there is.
I don't think that necessarily putting in, I mean, like, this film is as much about, it deals as much about with time, lofty concepts such as time and utopianism, as like The Room deals with betrayal and friendship. Like, it's just doesn't, referencing them does not necessarily make a wonderful film on those subjects. Before I drag it even more, I would have to say it was very entertaining, and it is now my room, and I'll be watching it with my friends and family at Christmas for a laugh.
Yeah, I mean, well, I often watch like Coppola films during Christmas time anyway. They're usually on, so like,
here's a new one for you.
Yeah,
here's a new festive favourite for you.
Sparkling. Exactly, spark. Yeah.
It's just, I did you guys read anything about the controversy on set?
Yes,
There was
we
all
were
sorts of
talking a
them.
little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a few.
What?
I saw that too.
Oh, you did?
If we're talking about the sort of the groupings.
So do tell.
Well, there was a lot of allegations from various extras saying that Coppola's attitude towards the female actors, especially the extras, well, not extras. Is that tone deaf to say extras?
I think it's now a supporting actors.
Supporting actors and actresses, and instances of him sort of dragging them into his lap to quote get them in the mood for the scene, and then in party scenes like going up to them and like grabbing them by the waist. And there's a lot of footage of this of him like grabbing them and then like kissing them and then like pushing them away, and then he's like not reciprocating. There's a lot of that on set, but there's also a lot of interesting dynamics and drama with other members of the crew, which I find very interesting. So, which have happened before in previous films, but this seems to have taken it like into the nth degree. Where at one point the art department walked out, so the art director walked out, and the production designer as well, and a lot of the art crew, like all the people that were working on the visuals and the graphics, just walked out.
Right, I heard about the graphics.
And the graphics, yeah, because they kept asking him to make firm decisions, and then he said something like, paraphrasing, how am I meant to tell you what Megalopolis looks like when I don't know what Megalopolis looks like? Like apparently he would get into like a fight with someone, with an actor or a member of the crew, and then he'd be like, I can't do this, and then he'd walk away and then hide in his Silverfish, which is an Airstream caravan, and quote direct from there, but you can see that panned out as well as you would think it would pan out. So many such stories, many such cases.
I know. I think there's going to be plenty and plenty of stories that will be kept uncovered, from this interesting film. But also, I'll have to say, I did appreciate Jason Schwartzman in this film. Yeah. So as I did with my Coppola love of Marie Antoinette, he was my favorite character. I don't like that film, but I like him in that. Because he's never really totally believable unless he's like in a Wes Anderson film, because I've just kind of like Wes Anderson films. He is just the film. But ultimately it's just Jason Schwartzman in the film, and he just kind of, yeah. So I really got a kick every time I saw him in the film. Like I was like, there he is. What's he gonna do? What did he do? Like
he played the drums at one point as a punchline. I remember that. Yeah.
What was his role? He was
ballroom.
I forgot. Honestly.
You could ask that about almost every character in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, what are they doing?
Although I will say that there was something that was interesting, genuinely, was Shia LaBeouf's character and his kind of like...
It was fun.
Yeah, in terms of the way he looked, but his kind of, stabby, backy behaviour.
Oh, yeah, so funny.
Oh, Mark Kermode really, really hated him for some reason in this. Yeah, no, I mean, not that I go by Mark Kermode's like reviews or anything like that, but I do, like before I saw his review right before I went to the film, and I was like, oh, I was expecting a lot worse, but then I was like, yeah, well, this is fine. What's wrong with it? You know what I mean? It's fine. Yeah, I mean, I do like Aubrey Plaza, and I did like,
yeah, she turned it around. So I think for all of the actors for whom the film was a joke that they were in on, it was fine and not uncomfortable. But then for a couple who definitely didn't feel like they were in on the joke, it was kind of uncomfortable to watch them sort of play out.
Yeah, her name's fantastic too. Wow, Platinum. I mean, we'll never.
Yeah. Well, I just kept feeling that he was trying to do to pull off a kind of Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet kind of thing, like hyper real,
also very nice,
bringing it exactly, but like just couldn't quite pull it off. And just why did the costumes look like it was 2011 as well, and it was like a teenager designed the costume?
Probably they were designed in 2011.
Yeah, and they're just sitting in a back room. It just was,
there was a datedness to everything about this film, and I think maybe if it had come out in the 90s, we would have been like, wow,
maybe it's avant-garde.
So I think there were films I saw in the 90s where I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I mean, I was young, so I was like,
can you imagine that back-to-back with like Greg Araki film in the theater?
Definitely. It had a lot of potential then.
I keep having flashbacks to this movie. That's the effect this film has had on me. Like, do you ever get Megalopolis flashbacks? Because I do.
I keep getting flashbacks to Adam Driver's shoes in the first scene where he's like
standing back and he stops time.
Yeah, but there's something about the detail and like the wonderful like digital crispness of the image like around the film. But honestly, when he like comes out and you can see it in a close up, you just like you can feel the leather that he's wearing. There's something about that
Visceral.
yeah, where I was like, oh, I just want to. I can almost like, you know how people are saying that if you imagine, like if you look at anything, you know what it'll taste like your tongue just knows exactly what. Like
This is a very synesthetic.
well, it's like I don't know why, but I think your tongue can just like really imagine what things. But try and do it. Like if you look at the wall, you're like, you know exactly.
I'm imagining Adam Driver's shoe.
But you're like, yeah, I can feel it on my tongue, type of thing. It was that visceral.
Wow. Dang. Did you see an IMAX?
No.
Just you would have had a riot at IMAX. I saw it in a wraparound. Takes you by surprise. Keeps you guessing. Keeps you on your toes. That's a positive.
Quote that you wanted to mention. A quote.
Oh, it was going to be my wrap-up quote, but if that's the hint for me to wrap up.
I think we could go on another 20 minutes about what the heck that was.
Because we could talk about the political allusions, you know, because he is obviously trying to draw parallels between the modern day mess that is global / particularly American politics and the fall of Rome. So do you think that was a success?
Yeah, I mean, enough. I mean, and also I think they were saying that the incoherence was a bit like Greek tragedy, right? Is that what they're sort of saying? Because like some people said they didn't understand what was being said or the way that
They're literally Latin at points, so like 99.9% of the human population would not.
Yeah, I took 4 years of Latin actually, so maybe that's why.
I did as well. I should know it, and even I was like, "Are you freaking serious?" I'm not against pretension. I love it with pretension in cinema. That's the place for it. But like, this is just so obtuse.
I think also with the end scene where they all kind of on spoiler,
Yes, please.
you know, on the stage, and I think it was at that point I was like, so what? Like, and yes, so and yeah, it's like, and like, what are you trying to say with this? I think it's just like when things aren't really fleshed out in the film, where, you know, as you said, with pretension and things like that, if they were meant to be these like pretentious people who are kind of all about power, and at the end nothing really changes, I'm like, yeah, I can see that working. That wasn't, I wasn't getting that that's what he was trying to say. So I think it's just that feeling at the end where you're like, and this is it. And you're like,
yeah. I mean, there's such opportunity there to talk about and make allusions to grand utopian projects and city projects, but it just sort of ends up with these characters sort of aggrandizing themselves on screen and soliloquizing in a really obtuse and sort of opaque way.
Yeah.
It feels very self-serving.
Yeah.
And so I saw some criticism actually that said that the reason why, and one of the reasons why audiences aren't liking it is because we're just too used to the whopper, have it your way, corporate film,
like shark
industry,
and
we just don't know good art when we see it.
Well, who said that?
It was a guy who was writing for, I don't even want to name him, he doesn't deserve it. It was a fedora tipping article, but it was on Roger Ebert. Right, so you can find it there.
Yeah,
but yeah, he was drawing just that and saying, you just don't, you know what? All these Marvel films are all about fan service, and when someone comes along and does what he wants, you just can't handle his creative vision. It's an interesting argument, and non-argument.
Equally, how like now that you said that, I'm like, I could see myself watching it again in like with someone maybe, and like
talking about it.
Yeah, and talking about it and kind of figuring it out, because that's exactly what it achieved for me. Like that kind of feeling, like, oh, I kind of want to know more in terms of maybe there was something else that I didn't see, but it's not like I'm dying to know. But I'm
exactly.
I
think knowing won't help you enjoy it more. Unfortunately, I feel
the neutralness of you know, like if I don't understand a film and yet I love it, you know, like even like Mulholland Drive, you know, like it doesn't totally make sense, but I still love it.
Yeah.
This I could see again and be like, oh, I get that, or I can, or there's little things buried, you know, underneath or something. But I'm not dying to see it again.
I thought it was so funny that I want to go again. Like pretty soon.
And you hate it.
And I hate it.
What's going to happen?
So it's the success of a film, you know. Like, it's like, I'll be watching.
We're going to be doing this years later, and we're going to be like, best films of the 2020s, you know, and you're going to be like,
You know what I can't forget is Megalopolis. Like, I hated it then. I love it now.
Well, I think someone said in the comments they will like go and see this film, and then 10 years later it'll be a cult classic when it goes underground.
Oh, I think it will. They're really banking on that. They're really hoping.
Yeah.
People that love it really hoping that other people's eyes will be opened and the veil will be lifted.
It could be one of those films.
It'll be a cult film.
Yeah, a cult film you do substances with or something like that and like enjoy more.
I was crying sober, so take that as my recommendation.
I'm surprised you were crying.
I was crying with laughter.
Oh, crying.
I was crying with laughter.
Okay.
Because I was trying to repress it, just in case other people were like really enjoying.
Yeah.
They weren't. They were laughing too, but like I was trying not to be.
There were a few moments
annoying.
that there was like out loud laughter around us. I also just to note there was that they had to change the film a bit in the UK because there's supposedly this callback moment where so basically someone has to stand on this. Someone has to stand. Somebody in the audience has to respond to. I think it was Adam Driver or something.
And soliloquizing.
There's not enough. The UK just didn't have enough staff. I think in like cinemas to
see in the times we don't have enough people to respond to Adam Driver's
able to coordinate such things. So they've had to completely recut the film for the UK, supposedly. Because again, our colleague Emma went and asked all about that because she knows the nitty gritty about this, and they were like, "What are you talking about?" But yeah, and so they just basically have somebody off screen say something back instead of being sort of the participant. But yeah, this interactive participant thing got me excited. If it was anything interesting,
yes. Yeah, it could be. This is the thing. It's like so many good ideas. Like they begin and then it's just sort of flop.
And you had so much time. But I think that's kind of the problem, which is where we had that discussion about Netflix last month. But when you have too much time, too much money, sometimes it gets worse and worse over. And I think that's maybe the problem with this.
And yeah, he doesn't seem like the kind of guy who's taking much input.
He was supposedly like Adam Driver helped him.
From the big names for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think
not
sort of. Yeah, but also I think they're all sort of distancing themselves as much as possible. They're on to other things, and so it's not like they're going around promoting this extremely. I think they hope that people might forget about it quickly. I mean, Aubrey Plaza's already on to like 7 other films she's already made.
Aubrey Plaza's performance was so funny. I would like to see it in the iteration which Coppola had teased that he would like to have done it in. So he initially wanted it to be performed somewhere like the Red Rocks Amphitheater in Colorado.
Oh, wow.
And have it be a real, like a full stage production. And it would have gotten away with what it was trying to do so much better.
If it was a
theater production.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, which makes sense. But is it time for my...
Yeah, your quote. Let's end on the quote.
Amazing. I would just, all in all, despite the fact it was like highly entertaining, I fear that Megalopolis is what Coppola feared Apocalypse Now would be in the documentary when he's being interviewed, which is that it would be a really shitty, embarrassing, pompous film on an important subject.
Oh.
Yeah. My opinion.
Okay. And that's Megalopolis on, make sense out of what we just said, if you can. And we'll on to the next.
Let's go, boys. It's showtime. Wakey.
Hey, Fleck, you got a joke for us today?
We use music to make us whole, to balance the fractures within ourselves.
I'm nobody. I haven't done anything with my life like you have. Let's get out of here.
And the next film we're going to review is Joker, Folie à Deux, the musical of Joker we didn't know we needed. Because of Clara.
Because we didn't know what we were getting.
So how do you describe this film?
Well, it is a 2024 American jukebox musical. It's like, there's more. A jukebox musical psychological thriller directed by Todd Phillips from a screenplay that he wrote with Scott Silver, who I believe he's worked with before. It's loosely based on DC Comics characters. This film was conceived as a standalone film that was intended to be released by DC Black, which is a sort of spin-off of DC, which handles more mature, darker material and does like prestige spin-offs. But it is actually, in fact, a sequel. Yeah, it is not that. It is a sequel of Joker. The 2019 smash hit.
Controversial
smash hit.
Yeah.
Which everyone says appealed to a sort of incel crowd, or at least a particular kind of male comic book crowd. But we can talk about that. We can talk about audiences and about the Marvel audience and the DC audience, and what they were banking on happening for this film, because I find that element very, very interesting.
Yeah. I remember reviewing that film on our show, and we had and I'm just discussing this like Kat said with Megalopolis. We had one person who adamantly loved the film and one person who adamantly hated the film, and I was like, meh, like the whole thing. Like, I mean, it wasn't, it didn't move me either way, except saying, Joaquin Phoenix did a relatively good job, and I thought Todd Phillips didn't. So like, I was one of those moments where I was like, actually, actors or good acting performances can happen in films that are like don't have the best scripts. But this film really shocked me, sort of like in terms of, I wouldn't say I liked it better or worse. I just liked it different than the last one. Do you know? Well, I mean, I didn't hate it. It was the same thing, and I really I didn't mind that it was a psychological sort of romance, or sort of. I think some of the things I liked about the first film, and I'm going to say like and kind of quotes, because I didn't impressed. I didn't really like the film, but I just sort of liked the look of the film, the 70s-ness of the film, and particularly, and sort of just understanding sort of a story around mental health and trauma and whatnot. And so I think I sort of gathered the connection and sort of, the takeoff with that. I really didn't love hearing music I liked being sung that way.
You don't like a jukebox,
like
DC Black,
like Shaha, like by Nina Simone. I'll never be able to listen to, and I hopefully will be able to listen to in the same way if I will just get over the singing on this film. I thought it was quite atrocious at times, and also just bizarre. But yeah, I think again, because I thought it was going to be so bad, I didn't think it was the worst thing I've ever seen. Able to go back to what I said, I actually like the first one better than this one, just because it was more visually stimulating, and I think we got a little bit more from Joaquin Phoenix's like craziness and the
more half-time play for sure.
Yeah, and this kind of didn't, but it wasn't like it. Again, I expected to hate it a lot more.
I'm so mixed.
Yeah,
I'm so mixed on it, because I really don't like it for so many reasons, which I'm getting to.
Yeah.
But I have now having ruminated and mulled it over, I kind of respect it.
Yeah.
So people were complaining. Even my friends were complaining, saying like, "Oh, it's a musical. Like, there's more musical numbers than La La Land. Like, how that's crazy. Like, that's too many." So as Todd Phillips says, not that I'm like defending his corner right now, but he does say that it's technically not a musical because it's dialogue that the Joker just can't say, so it's technically not a musical. But the reason why I respect it is because it's a musical, and they really gambled on the audience. Basically, they knew exactly who they'd won with before, and they just were like, we're actually just going to do the opposite of fan service for like a comic book movie, and we're just going to do what we want. and have it as a standalone, kind of like almost like a joke.
Yeah.
So it's really meta in itself. It's like it's a nice fun little joke.
Right. The audacity of it, I suppose.
The sheer audacity.
Yeah.
Of it.
Okay.
Kat, did anyone think that in terms of the musical numbers and the way that I think musicals work a lot of the time, traditionally, right? Like musicals are often, I think, happy films, or that's how we like to think of them. Not necessarily that they always portray happy, things that happen to people, but I think it's kind of joyous a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Did you think that the musical aspect worked with the topic of the film, or
No, not for me.
It allowed it to be unhinged.
Yeah.
It's a good avenue to make something unhinged, but when you only use the device of putting in songs to repeat the same thing over and over again, which is, gee, we love each other, then there's no point. Like any musical that would take all of its numbers with them all, with all the messages and stories and like the plot progression that they contain was to be broken down into just we love each other, then that's where you're going to get. And that's where my main issue with the film is pacing, and just like they just kept throwing in songs that just say, I really love you, don't worry about it. And then there was one original number which was like really forgettable, which is just not where you want to be with that either.
You're right. It was like, I get you, you get me.
Yeah, it's just over and over and over and over again. I was actually like, oh, this is kind of promising at first. But I went in cold, not knowing what was going to happen, and I did fall for the trap that they set, which is I assumed, I don't know if we want to talk twist yet, but we probably should. But I assumed that it was going to be a case of Joker goes to trial, Lady Gaga comes along, and then they break loose and cause hell.
Yeah, like the dynamic duo.
But they kind of rebuke the audience that was banking on that, which I kind of found a little bit funny. Oh, I just wish it'd been more entertaining in making that point.
So it's so interesting because I haven't seen the first one, so I'm not a massive like DC fan in general, but I watched the trailer ahead of this recording just to kind of see if he would tell me anything about it, and when I looked at the trailers, they actually looked pretty much the same in terms of what the films were going to be about. But then the second one, I think, promised a lot, and then it didn't happen. And then a lot of people had issue with that. Like, it dragged, it was a bit slow.
Yeah.
But then I think for someone, again, who's not a fan, and kind of going back to what you were saying about this was meant to be a standalone film, but I guess didn't work out. Yeah, for some reason. It did feel like, outside of it being the joke, it was also a kind of interesting character study on like how, I guess, the kind of complete kind of psychosis and depression or whatever he was going through, what that manifests like. And again, going in without any expectations of it being based on DC coming out, it being a sequel and all that stuff. I enjoyed the musical. Like I when it started, I was like, oh, no, what's going on? Is the singing? But actually, I think as a way of expressing Joker's psychosis, it kind of worked in that it was so unexpected, and you kind of like, whoa, this is so unhinged. Like, what's going on? But I think because there was also no resolution for him, or like for us, I guess, as the audience of like, okay, now all hell is going to break loose. I was like, yeah, this is just a film that kind of goes sadder and sadder and sadder and never kind of comes out of that. It kind of leaves you, and I like it now.
I like it now because of the twist at the end, and because it is such like a, I apologize for sounding as pretentious as I'm about to sound, but because it is so meta. So the fact that it doesn't give us what we thought we were expecting from the Joker and the arc of the Joker and the arc of the Joker meeting Harley Quinn, and then the beginning of that, which in all the comic books and all the previous films, the narrative that everyone is very familiar with is that the Joker goes and takes on Gotham and tries to destroy Gotham, and he sits at the head of a cult, like an accelerationist kind of like gang cult. But the fact that we're experiencing that disappointment along with Gaga, and then you're experiencing this not being the guy who is going to be doing that in this film. He's not going to be wreaking havoc. And then the fact that there's like those meta sort of like self-aware elements at the end. Did you remember the bit where he's like, where Gaga starts singing at him again, and then he's just like, please just stop singing. And she's just like, she keeps singing. He's like, just talk to me, just have some dialogue, please. And we're all just like, my friends and I in cinema just sitting there, just like creasing it, because that's what we were all thinking.
Yeah.
So it was self-aware, and it was beautiful
It was
in a grim way. Like it was shot very well.
I think like the betrayal. I think that Joker goes through of like, you know, like the fact that people like him for what they think he is, and if he doesn't fulfill that role, what does that mean? But it was just so harrowing that he just kept kind of messing up, you know, and things just weren't gonna get better for him because that's the reality, and that in juxtaposition with the fact that he's in the, you know, you're kind of seeing the entire film through his perspective, which is where he's saying and stuff. So you're like, well, this is clearly not real. I think, the reality of his position and then the reality or the kind of unreality of the format of the film, I think kind of really worked together. Just because, again, it kind of went completely against the expectation, especially at the end.
I just wish there was more of that, is the thing. So I just like, I missed and desired more from any direction. So I'm not a big DC fan, although I do know, I'm realizing now I do know more than I thought. But for example, like Harvey Dent, so he's like meant to be the one of the good guys, but like a mixed character who tries to handle Gotham and sort of like shepherd Gotham away from evil. So his inclusion as the lawyer, as was just underused. I felt like it was just like that was the kind of like borderline offensive like fan service, like here, have Harvey Dent as a young man, and then but they didn't use him. And that could have been a really great vehicle to have to look at the political intrigue, to look at any of the themes of handling fame, of media, and that really important, really interesting point in the 70s where fame and celebrity culture was completely changing. And then you've got like the kind of the corruption, the rot, and like rolling news coming in, and like all these really interesting points that are happening, which are themes that the Joker was created to explore. They just didn't really go for it, which I thought was a little bit of a waste. Although I did like the several references that are made to the TV movie that Joker was in. And like he's in prison, and he's gotten wind that there's been a TV movie made about him, and it's fueling the legend and the lore and the celebrity of Joker, the character.
And why Lee was watching it for and into him.
And so I enjoy that there was reference to that sort of, but you never see it or you never hear any details about it. I thought that was like a bit of levity that was added in there. I like that. That was good.
Yeah, I mean, I also, maybe again, I was watching the Venice sort of red carpet and talk about it and stuff like that, because I would notice that this film is coming out at a really, speaking of controversy, but like a really tough time for Joaquin Phoenix, because I don't know if you know what's happened to him, but he just left about 2 days before Todd Haynes' latest film was they were about to shoot a film, and Todd Haynes had him in, and he just abandoned it, and basically the whole film's been scrapped because of his decision. So he's not somebody that people trust, and so it literally came that this news came out, and then he had to go to the Venice sort of like to push this. But supposedly he's known for doing this many, many times. So all this kind of stuff has been coming out as well. So for bailing on films,
and yet he didn't bail on this one. I suppose it's.
I know, but
funny. Also, this is actually based on a dream of Joaquin Phoenix's.
Is that what
this entire film was based on a dream that he had, where the Joker was singing,
like rewrites and requirements and stuff like that in order to do it. And so perhaps in the case, we don't know the details, but they were trying to get that information out of him right when he was sort of doing the first press at Venice about this. But also like Gaga and Joaquin did not seem to have very much chemistry, like speaking to each other, and he made some really interesting comments about like her losing weight and him losing weight, and it was very, very awkward. But he was not a very. But point is he wasn't a very likable character publicly at this time when this came out. Coming off of like what did I think he won the Oscar, didn't he, for this? Or when he made the first film, he he was doing quite well. But now he's not necessarily. So I don't know. I really don't. Maybe my distaste of him has grown a bit because of what I've heard about that. But I didn't like the music numbers. I'm not saying I liked the concept or sort of the audacity of such, but I just didn't like
the fair.
Yeah. And I'm not a huge Gaga fan, but I could have had a little bit more, like
She didn't have much going on.
no.
I mean, she's an interesting character, and I understand if they're kind of saving that for later. And this is, like you're focusing on the Joker. I understand that, but there just wasn't much going on.
So
She was very
there's going to be another one.
Yes.
Okay.
Whether or not she will be Harley Quinn
Right.
remains to be seen.
I also wonder, I mean, they're set like trying to protect this film for some reason. I'm not, but and I agree with you, Amanda. I didn't really enjoy the singing this, as it happened.
70% of it.
Yeah. But I wonder if something about what you're saying, that there wasn't much going for her, because in the end, she's just like one of, and she could have been anyone, for the purposes of what she was kind of going for. You know what I mean?
She's Harley Quinn. She's going to take over Gotham.
Yeah. I don't know that.
I don't know that I don't know this either.
Yeah. So just to as background, so at the end of the first film, the Joker kills a couple of Wayne Enterprises employees on a subway, and then the general public see that as that's the match.
Yeah, call to action.
The call to action.
Yeah.
The catalyst of a rebellion against the powers that be in Gotham. And then when the Joker eventually goes on TV and then starts killing people and making a big fuss and getting a public audience, finally, the riot and the mob that ensues is what the people that are in that mob that the Joker creates are who kills Batman's parents. So that's the origin story. So Joker has a direct creation of Batman that evening. So that's why everyone's waiting for they're hoping this is a new generation of Batman, basically, which people care about. Apparently, I have a lot to say on the mental health depictions in this film.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was again also an issue with the first one.
For sure.
So I think there was a lot of people who did like it because of that, but also a lot of people who didn't. So
yeah,
it's interesting. So what do you think?
Trauma porn and misery lit is very popular, and it is very real, but it is a fine line between being tasteful and comforting. An art form that comforts the disturbed and disturbs the comfortable, as opposed to just disturbing the already disturbed.
Yeah.
And I feel like this kind of sits in a bad place.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really... So, the DC Black creations, they're labelled as such because they are more visceral and they are more, quote, adult. And definitely all the abuse, the violence and the murder that happens in this film, and the regular allusions to suicide are really visceral, and they're really not quoted in the same way that any action film is, where it's sort of pow, 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 bad guys down. It's very much wow, you're actually just watching someone suffering.
Yeah.
And it is, and I can't tell if I think it's very good and very well done because it was so impactful, or if I'm kind of resentful of it. I'm probably going to say the latter, because it doesn't really explore, not that it needs to, but if you're going to go there, if your whole thing is the psychology of the Joker, and you're going to go for raw and realism, then you could dissect it a little bit more. But it just felt like he was parading his trauma on trial, and everyone was just sort of referencing it, and there wasn't any sort of dissection or thinking about it, and there was constant sort of fudging of diagnosis and terms. And I think it was a bit of a send up of the government, the American government, sort of and their inability to diagnose or be caring for people who have problems. But it did feel a bit it felt a bit prurient and voyeuristic in times, as opposed to sort of substantial and very sort of insightful.
But how did you feel about the one before? Do you remember that? Because I would say that was a similar thing, where I think people went either way on that. And the only thing I sort of connected with that is someone who's lived in New York. I feel like there's quite a lot of people out there that have this very lonely life there, and that sort of navigating that sort of city and how isolating it is, it sort of did work within that story particularly. And it was much more emphasized and or much more realized in the way that the film, the narrative of the film. This we had to remember, as you didn't see it, Kat, but you had to remember that in order to sort of to be
okay with it as well, because this is obviously, he's off the deep end in terms of reality at this point, so you're not going to experience the kind of the more clinical observation of his experience of his mental health decline, for sure.
But now he's also dealing with prison, and and then what that's now. It's
just it's all of it is in service of a superhero film. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like when you remember that, you're just like, oh, that feels a bit too exploitative. Spencer Kornhaber of The Atlantic said that watching it felt like punishment for the crime of wanting to be entertained.
Fair.
And I really agree, because it was a bit of a slog.
It was a slog.
If you're not watching people suffering and you're like slogging through that, you're slogging through like the music.
I thought Megalopolis was more of a slog.
It was much more of a slog. No, for sure.
I saw them kind of back to back almost.
Whoa.
Yeah. So
Like a Barbenheimer.
Yeah. But it was interesting because I was getting quite tired towards the end. Like I watched the Megalopolis first, very like excited, ready for anything, and then with the Joker, I was just like, oh my god. And there was one point where also the cinema was like full. Like I know that there's a lot of
mine was empty,
and it was one of the like biggest screens in Omni as well. So yes, very very full. And I was like, I found myself falling asleep at one point, and then. And you know when you're like closing your eyes and stuff, and then you kind of like, and I was like, oh, let me just open my eyes to like watch this scene or whatever, and then I could feel being pulled into the story, and like my interest was kind of piqued, and I was like, okay, do you know what? It did do that, and like I do appreciate it for kind of as a character study again. I think it worked, and someone who maybe isn't particularly familiar with all of the Joker like lore, I think the build-up of the tension of him kind of being, like most of the film takes place in the court, really, doesn't it? In the courtroom. So to see the build-up of his character and the way that you're waiting for him to break, and you're like, something's going to go bad, really, really, like, like it's going to be massive. And then it kind of doesn't in the way that you expect. I was like, I could feel like my attention kind of going up towards, like from the maybe first third.
Same. Like I have to respect the fact that it took me places that I didn't know it was going to, and for that I have my attention.
Yeah. I think this cemented that I don't like Todd Phillips at all. Like as a director,
you're like, I've just realized I don't like this.
I mean, and I'm not interested in seeing his career thrive. You know,
Actually, I do not wish him well.
This brings him down a notch. I wouldn't be upset about it. I mean, it's not like my absolute like hatred for James Cameron's career, but because I haven't necessarily seen him be like an egomaniac on television. But I'm just not into this guy at all, and that's okay with me.
The fact he ended the film with a cover of Daniel Johnson, True Love Will Find Me in the End, who was a really ill bipolar man in a film that completely just fudges all diagnosis and is like, oh, we're going to show how mentally ill people are actually really skinny. They're just like real thin, like that. I just there's too much of that, and I'm actually a bit annoyed now.
I think he's audacious, but he doesn't have the talent to back it up. And like I think he tries things, which is like, oh, conceptually could be interesting, but then it just doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't go in the right direction. It doesn't go in a cohesive direction. It doesn't go in a direction where, I mean, at least we're talking about it, but like it's not in necessarily a good way.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite cheeky that he's named it like Folie, like, oh, it's a delusion. It's like, oh, well, it's actually just, it's so left field because
also
it's all just not real.
It's hacky.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's Joker Folie à Deux, and we are done with that review, and check it out if you would like to. So the final review we're going to do on the show is Taste of Mango, and it's coming out on the 15th of November. It's we've gotten quite a few recognitions and awards so far, and for a debut for Chloe Abrams. And Kat, tell us about this film.
Yeah, very briefly. So as Amanda said, it's a debut documentary by Chloe Abrams, follows the story of her Sri-Lankan mother and the complicated relationship that she has with her own mother, so Chloe's Nana. As the story unravels, we find ourselves in the midst of a vulnerable storytelling that tackles sexual abuse, migration, pain, and womanhood across 3 generations.
And what did you both think?
I really liked it.
I did, yeah. I always get, as you know, I'm always a little bit wary about films that are made about one's own family documentaries, because it's a good in. So I came into this not knowing that it was a lauded film, so I was a bit like concerned that it would be a bit tense. Yeah, because it wouldn't be impactful or say much. Because I think a lot of people make documentaries with their families and use it as an in to speak about subjects, and it doesn't hook me. And but I think this does not fall into that category. I thought it was really good.
I agree with you that there's just a lot of stories about family trauma and whatnot that I'm quick to be I've seen this kind of film. But the film really I guess it's not very long, but I would say about 20 minutes in really sort of shocks you. And it's about sharing trauma, family trauma to each other, confessing. And I think it's so raw in the way that it does it. It's really, really powerful. And nobody is right or wrong in this. It's about dealing with this. And Kat, what do you think?
Yeah, I really hated it the first 15 minutes. I just had
to. I was a bit resistant.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of resistance, especially with the format. It's so shaky in the first 15 minutes. And I think the first thing that pops into your head is, oh no, this is a kind of a student-type documentary about, But actually, as it progresses, I think the storytelling takes place in these kind of layers that are unveiled to you kind of one by one. And it's done really beautifully. I think there's a lot of craft in it. And the same with a lot of the footage, even though it is so shaky and annoying at the beginning, the kind of close-ups of different, of maybe people's eyes or just kind of textures of kind of water and things like that. I think it just works. And then I think interestingly, as you get into it towards the end, the format kind of settles and it's a lot a bit more professional actually. And I like that that's also probably part of, that's intentional as you go through it. So yeah, really, really beautifully done. One thing that I liked was that it wasn't pretentious, as you were saying, it wasn't just like any other story. But then also I thought that the way that the director depicted the different characters in the family was so interesting, because, you talk about films like The Joker or whatever, and you're like, oh, is he the villain? Is he the good guy? Like, what is he?
Yeah.
And actually with the documentary, I thought that as the Nana kind of comes over from Sri Lanka for a visit, but you kind of get to know a lot bit about her before she does. So you kind of know that she maybe didn't have the best reaction to the sexual abuse that her daughter experienced and all that stuff. And as she comes through the door, there's almost this like anticipation of like, it's her, it's this villain.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so interesting that and what's great about, I guess, like documentary filmmaking is that you have these villains that exist among us. They don't have, like in The Joker, they don't have these like wicked faces or like
finality of evil.
Yeah, they're just people. And that is just, I think, done really well. And then obviously you do get to empathize and sympathize even with the Nana, and you appreciate why maybe she behaved a certain way. But the fact that it's all women and it's 3 generations and it is kind of explored one by one. And then, as you said, there's those confessions that really just kind of overwhelm you in a way. Yeah, I thought it really worked.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think the main character or the person filming, Chloe, does say, like, if you love someone, that like, or loving someone can also mean that you hurt them, and I think that's really what this, and all of the confessions and all of the the close-ups, like you're saying, sort of just covers really, really, really well. I think the sound of this film, the sort of the soundtrack, as in through voice and confession and sometimes silence and sometimes just observing,
Harton.
There you go. I think that's the through line, and these visuals can, like you said, can kind of be annoying or sort of how we sort of envision them to be, like raw footage or whatnot, isn't as powerful as that kind of edit with the sound. And I think that's works really, really well. And so you could listen to it almost as much as you could see it and watch it. It does work together very well.
I was a little bit concerned that, I was concerned because I knew there would be intergenerational trauma explored.
Yeah.
And I was hoping it wouldn't feel sort of exploitative or a bit mawkish.
Yeah.
Which I thought there was a bit of a danger of, but it did not deliver that. And I think it would still be as powerful a film if it wasn't for the fact that there was sort of like, the twist of the revelations as well. I think it would be, you don't need the sort of sensationalist revelation of terrible things happening necessarily for this to work. Just so the audience knows, it's not we're like wow, that twist was.
No, I mean, but that twist really made you think.
But God, though, yes, that is
just how, like you said, generational trauma and why that happens in that way, and so it did really shock me.
Yeah. And I think that also the significance of the whole, the fact that the Nana and her daughter had a bit of a break to their relationship. They talk about not speaking for a while and stuff, and the fact that her daughter had to, Rosanna is her name, she moves to the UK, and then she has her daughter Chloe. But the fact that she can't escape the kind of problems that women experience kind of everywhere in the world, that's, I think, the whole point is that, you can do whatever you want, but the fact that you're a woman, it doesn't matter where you are.
Yeah, it's definitely a film like a tragedy about being a woman. There's one couple of quotes that stuck with me, which is the grandmother, the eldest matriarch, saying to her daughter, "You're blessed to have a man like Jeff," actually, which is quite tragic in and of itself. That you should consider yourself blessed that you have a man who isn't abusive. And then later on, then the mother's advice to Chloe, the filmmaker, saying, "Be wary of your smile; it might get you in trouble." So it's such a fraught landscape of motherhood, parenthood, being a child, just being a person, being tethered to all these different relations, like the sort of like the mitochondrial web of other people and family, and how they can both be the most valuable advice givers, life givers, creators, but also your worst detractors and your deal keepers, and also your worst nightmare and your torturers as well. And I think that the layers of complexity that they've managed to fit in there and just show. I found it very comforting. I always find it very comforting when, without shouting, screaming, scraping, reality TV-esque drama, there's the revelation and the hug that terrible things happen and families are awful and families are complicated. But there are so many different shifting planes of existing in a society and in a family with regards to time and space and experience and feelings, and sort of watching those moments play out, like the birthday parties and them just spending time in the flat together, all 3 generations of them sitting together, when you're ruminating on all the revelations that you've heard, not quite knowing the exact timelines of everything happening. I found it very intriguing and very comforting.
Yeah,
but very interesting.
I also think it was interesting just about time and how sometimes the process of dealing with this, it takes quite, I mean, it's like you said, 40 years or whatnot, of how someone deals with trauma and when they're comfortable dealing with it, or just the patience to have a relationship with someone and know that might evolve over time, or might need its break, or might need, might be conditional. Yeah.
I think it's so really, it takes guts to be asking those questions that she was asking both her mum and her grandmother. I don't think she would have seen that much in her life. It's not like they were super, super close.
No.
Though obviously they had a relationship, but yeah. And I started following her on Instagram, the director, and she's got a baby as well, which is quite nice. There's a new generation that in the film. She's like, how would it? There's a lot of questions. Yeah. But also her nana passed away.
Oh.
Yeah. So I think the film, again, spoiler alert, I think it kind of ends with Nana kind of finally admitting that, yes, she should move back to the UK. She wants to be with her children. She wants to leave her abusive husband. But then I don't know if that happened, because I think the film was finished last year, and then the way that the director posted about it on Instagram, she said, we went out, we were informed that Nana passed away. So I wonder if it never really, the loop hasn't been
closed, if you know, which is meaningful in of itself, isn't it? Like you don't get closure, unfortunately.
Yeah.
A lot of time. But one of the really interesting points on this about the dynamic of parenthood and being a child, I found really interesting was the default of loving a parent naturally versus falling in love with your parent, and how through getting to know them and understanding them, and I thought that was very interesting.
I think the film could be called like a love letter to her mum, especially.
Absolutely. Taste of Mango. It's out on the 15th of November in cinemas across the UK. So hopefully you'll go check it out. So, hi, and I'm back. I'm here with Wang, the director of Queries Festival, who's coming to town in Edinburgh at the Cameo from the 17th to the 21st of October. How are you doing?
Yeah, very great. Recovering from my last trip.
Yes. So you come to Edinburgh once a year. Really, really love your program always, and love when you're coming to town. But just tell us a little bit about this year's festival overall and what we should expect.
Yeah, so I think this year's festival went really well, and we got a chance to show a lot of rarely seen cinema as usual from various countries. And I think I'm really happy to the films we are bringing to Cameo, because it really give audience a great mix of what you can expect from East and Southeast Asian queer cinema.
And I mean, tell us that. I mean, for people who don't know about Queries, just give us an overall general sort of vision of your film festival.
Yeah, so Queries is a sort of cross-disciplinary festivals that showcases queer cinema, performing arts, visual arts, and movie image works from East and Southeast Asia and its diaspora communities. The festival was founded back in 2020 during the pandemic. That's when we met each other. And so the festival has been going on since then. And we usually do our festival in April, May in London. And then in autumn, we bring the festival, a section of festival highlights, touring to different cities across the UK. So this year we are visiting 15 cities, which is big.
That's a lot of work, and for a small team, but exciting as well, and really great that you bring it out to different cities across the UK. So tell me a little bit about your selection. I was really curious about your the 50th anniversary screening of Bye Bye Love. It was a really interesting story that you've recently discovered print and whatnot, and that sounds really exciting. So tell us a little bit about that film.
Yeah, so Bye Bye Love was a film made in 1974. So it was during that period, like in late 60s, early 70s, which Japanese sort of cinema scene was really booming, and filmmakers back then, they tried a lot of crazy stuff. I don't know if I'm sure most of people saw the film Funeral Parade of Roses. That was made in 1969, sort of one of the iconic works of Japanese New Wave. So Bye Bye Love has the similar vibe. And so it's talking about like a couple, they went on a road trip, but there's a lot of like interesting queer elements, also a lot of like, sort of, how do you say that? It's like so liberal and so free of how people viewing queerness and how people viewing gender. back then, and I feel like this film gives us a really interesting glimpse of the early queer landscape in the 70s of Japan, and also like a very interesting filmmaking as well. So I think the film has been considered lost for over decades, and then back in 2018, I don't know who discovered this print in a warehouse. So they brought it to I think it's Japan Foundation or some archive for restoration, and that's why the film got digitalized back in 2022. So we are really excited to be able to bring this film and then take it on tour to many cities in the UK.
Well, that's a great film, I think, to probably see in the cinema. I'm a really big fan of whole scene, and I've already just glimpsed a bit of it, and I love this one scene in her film already. So I'm really excited to see that and at the Cameo. Any other films that you want to sort of highlight? It looks like you also have a short film program as well.
Yeah, so we had a short film collection. I mean, short film has been one of our festival's focus, and just usually we try to sort of highlight emerging filmmakers' works through our short film program. So this short film program, again, is talking about queer imagination. There's crocodile, there's vampire, there's like a lot of like crazy things, ghosts happening in this short film program, and how these sort of imaginative characters to become a metaphor for queerness under the Asian cultural context. So I think it's very fun and very interesting short film program that everybody should check out. And we had we have 3 Mandarin speaking films in the program as well. So we had The Last Year of Darkness, which is a documentary about southern China's queer scene, focused on a sort of clubbing house in Chengdu. And we have, of course, Tsai Ming-liang's The River, which is one of his iconic works. He made in 1997, and it's also part of his Water trilogy. So we've been featuring Tsai Ming-liang's films in our festivals pretty much every year. So it's a great chance to see these films on the big screen. And the last one is Love Bound, which is a really honest and intimate documentary, again, about a Chinese queer activist who's actually living in London. So this film, follows her journey of campaigning Chinese queer communities in the UK context. And the director and the protagonist, Cho Bai, they will be joining us for a Q&A after the screening. So it's a really great chance to be able to have a chat with the filmmaker and also to know sort of the queer movement about like the Chinese community.
And when's that screening with the Q&A with Love Bound?
Yeah, Love Bound will be on Saturday, 19th.
Okay.
19th, and I think it's 4 p.m. So and then and then after the film, we probably will have a drink somewhere. So I mean, everyone, if you are interested in this topic, please do join us.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually now just remember that I tried to see The Last Year of Darkness at IGFA last year and couldn't. Was sold out the screening. So it was a big deal, and so that's exciting that it's coming to Edinburgh, and I want to catch that as well. So the program looks great, and you're at the Cameo this year, so that's new for you. Is that right, or have you been here before?
No, it's our first time working with Cameo, so it's really exciting. I've heard so many good things about Cameo, so looking forward to working with them.
Well, we like showing things there as well, and so we're really excited to see the program again and just recommend everyone to go out on 17th to 21st. Anything else you want to say?
No, I think that's everything. But if everyone is interested in what we're doing, do follow us on social media. We are on Twitter and Instagram, or Queer East. Also Letterboxd now.
Yes, all right. Well, we have to get on Letterboxd as well.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Eve, for chatting with me today, and look forward to seeing you at the cinema.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, everyone.
So we're back, and I'm here with Morvern Cunningham, Hollie Ruddick, and Tomas Gerrard to talk a lot about the local cinema project. Morvern, you've been doing this, spearheading this for about 2 years now. Tell us what this project is.
Yeah. So, local cinema, as you say, kind of started last year. I think, to be honest, partly in the wake of the demise of Filmhouse as was then, which is, been a huge loss to the city. But I was already working, and I'm still working on a network called the Creative Community Hubs Network. And through that, we decided, with a bit of funding from the City of Edinburgh Council, to launch a kind of new network, a kind of sister project to the wider network called Local Cinema. And Local Cinema basically is a network of community cinemas around Edinburgh and kind of the wider Edinburgh area, presenting and hosting cinema screenings for people in their place. This year, we've kind of expanded things a little bit. We've got a little bit of extra funding through the Film Hub Scotland and Edinburgh Film Guild. And we're supporting kind of other exhibitors as well, exhibitors and cinema exhibitors who are in their kind of first or second year of starting up. So it's been great to kind of widen that this year.
Great. And you've had a lot of experience with community cinema over the years, but what do you think is the heart of community cinema? Why is it so important?
Like someone said to me recently, they were like, "Oh, we could do some expanded screenings for you," and I'm like, community cinema screenings are expanded screenings, because when you go along to a community cinema, you're never going to just watch the film and then leave. There's always going to be kind of added extras. There might be tea and coffee, there might be snacks and catering. Definitely someone will introduce the film and welcome you to the space. There might be a discussion afterwards. And what we've found with local cinemas, there's been some really nice kind of extras. I mean, Hollie can talk about the workshops that were done through Song of the Sea that were on earlier this month. But also, like, coming up, we've got Harold and Maude at Duncan Place Community Hub, which is a classic film, obviously, themes of kind of death and suicide, but it's also kind of a kind of interesting love story between two kind of an odd couple. And Duncan Place, as part of that, are going to be running a death cafe afterwards. So it's about kind of like these beautiful kind of additional extras to a screening that you would have in a place. And often also these screenings are of relevance to their place as well. Craig Miller now have been doing a lot of, there's not much, but the Bill Douglas back catalogue, and recently showed a new documentary about Bill Douglas, and Bill Douglas grew up like a stone's throw away in New Craig Hall. So it's also about kind of bringing meaning to a screening through place and through kind of the welcome that you get.
That's great. And Hollie, tell us a little bit about the Crannie Community Hub and why you got involved in terms of creating a film program there.
Yeah, so we're really centrally located right by Waverley, and we're trying to sort of build community in that area of Old Town that's quite transitory. We really want to have a strong community in that area. And so we put on a lot of activities for people. People can drop in. There's a place for them to hang out and feel welcome. So we really want to get involved because we love showing films, and we felt like we could, like Morvern was saying, have added extras. So make them real events. We've just done Song of the Sea, as Morvern mentioned, which was a really nice, lovely, beautiful film.
Yeah.
And one that everyone really was able to enjoy and participate in. And we had a workshop afterwards about people's connections with water and places that they'd love to visit by the beach or wherever. And so we're also trying to have opportunities for connection within the events. as well as bringing in facilitators, connecting with local organisations. We often do them in partnership with an organisation we're involved with. So it's really just an opportunity to get people seeing smaller films, mostly ones that we feel are of interest and tackle issues that people might be interested in discussing.
Great. And a couple of films coming up for the rest of the year, right?
Yeah, we're doing one on this Friday, actually, which is Coda, which is a film about a teenager who's a hearing teenager in a deaf family. And it's a really interesting film. We're hoping to have a discussion afterwards, talk about the themes of the film, growing up, etc., finding your place in the world. And yeah, then we're going to be doing The Princess Bride in November.
Classic,
right? So that should be a really fun way to sort of round off this year's screenings before we start next year's.
Yeah, we've got more coming in the spring. So also the program's kind of expanded last year. I think most of the kind of foundational community cinemas had about 3 screenings each throughout the year, and now that's kind of doubling. So we've got 3 in this kind of autumn-winter screening per community cinema, plus another 3 in the kind of January to March time. So I think there's something like, I don't know, like 20, 25 films in the current programme, and probably a similar amount next year too.
Talk about programming. I mean, are you sort of working? I mean, what do you like to program? But also, I mean, how do people go? Do you help Morvern kind of come up with help with through the programming at all?
I could take no responsibility for any of the films in the. Well, actually, yeah, maybe like Thomas can confirm that. Yeah, I did actually suggest The Holdovers, which is their kind of Christmas movie, but I think that's maybe the only thing that's maybe made it into the current program. No, a big kind of again kind of foundational aspiration and part of local cinema is for folk to kind of do it themselves. So all of the community cinemas are not only kind of putting on the screenings themselves, they're also doing kind of the programming and curation. So yeah, Hollie, how do you come about these films?
I guess we've asked people what they're interested in. We've seen as well if there's any groups that want to put something on with us. So it's kind of led by what people are wanting more than what we're thinking. Although we have had some involvement, and particularly my colleague was really keen on The Princess Bride. But yeah, we try to make it led by people because that's the point of the screenings, and also we want as many people as possible to come along to them, obviously. But it's really interesting process deciding who's putting on what, and the discussions that we have. Program discussions have been interesting, finding out people's different input and ideas as well.
Yeah, so we have kind of regular meetings where the folk who are involved in the community cinemas can talk about what they're thinking about programming and what they'd like to programme, if there's kind of unusual titles and things like that. So I think that's quite helpful in that kind of network sense, to have that sense of solidarity and just to be able to exchange ideas and share and nick ideas as well. I think
watch trailers.
Yeah, totally.
So have you seen audiences sort of jumping from one cinema event to another, or is it mostly just pretty much local people coming?
I mean, I try and go to as many of the screenings as I can. I think for every screening, there's kind of like a core group. I think particularly with the community cinemas who kind of almost, not necessarily the right terminology, but the kind of foundational community cinemas in the network are operating out of buildings that are already catering to their communities in some ways. So often they will have their own kind of community members and participants that come to things anyway. And this is a way of kind of offering something different for their community members. So there's that. But I do think that being part of this kind of shared programme expands that and amplifies that, and also advertises it to people who might want to see what's going on in their local area.
Great. So, Tomas, tell us a little bit about the BSL Film Club at Deaf Action and how you started that, why you started the film club.
So basically, I'm a deaf person that lives in Edinburgh. I love books. I love films. Yeah, if I'm not working, I'm reading a book or I'm watching a film. And I set up a book club, a BSL book club, a few years ago. That went really well. But obviously, it's a book, so there's no costs associated with it. Yeah, everyone just gets their own copy of the book from a library or borrow it from a friend or whatever. We come together once a month to read it. To discuss it. And so that went really well. Yeah, and I love the model. It's very wholesome. We get lots of different people that have never read a book, or lots of different, like, hearing people that were coming to this like deaf environment, and they were to kind of experience a conversation from like a deaf perspective of all these like literature, which obviously were written by hearing people. So that was great. So I'm not here to talk about my book club, sorry. But then I've always wanted a film club to run alongside that, because it's a very visual medium. You know, deaf people love films, deaf people love going to the cinema. You know, it's very loud, it's very visual, and you don't need much of it. There's not much of a language barrier with films. So I wanted to do that for years, but there are costs associated with it. You know, I found out that you can't just screen a film, you know, without permission or anything like that. Not that I've done it. I found that before I did it, which was great. And so I got in touch with these guys, local cinema, and they kind of like backed the pilot BSL Film Club with Deaf Action. We got a little basement at the bottom of my building, little cosy beanbags, screen in there. We showed a movie, deaf people come, enjoy it, and hearing people are welcome as well, enjoy it, and then afterwards we just have a good old chat about it. And that's the whole point of it, because there's so many things out there not accessible for deaf people. You know, we're just not able to kind of exist in that mainstream environment. Yeah. And if we did, it would be very, very difficult for people to understand our perspective on things. We've got quite a unique like take on it. And so that's really an opportunity for just a bunch of people to enjoy a film together, and then just to kind of have a good conversation in a safe space afterwards with no expectations. Just everyone just chill. You leave when you want. And it doesn't matter if you hated the film, you're welcome to say that too, which people have done.
So you had your first screening last week, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
So we screened Notes from Cheapland. I just picked it because I thought, you know, cheap, you know, Ireland, it's a little bit different. So I just thought, let's go ahead and do that. And so it was the first one we did. Unfortunately, I had to stream it, so I was sweating bullets through the whole thing because, you know, the buffering, and I had to subject them to 360, you know, kind of a HD kind of thing. Well, it wasn't HD. Anyway, so, but other than that, it went great. We had I think, actually, book club started with 4 people. This is from my experience, and I was the only deaf person there. And it was all like hearing BSL interpreters, because obviously they had BSL and access to English language. But this time around, it was, I think, maybe 4 hearing people and 10 deaf people. So it's a really like strong start.
Absolute result.
Yeah, massive result. And I think it just goes to show, books is a little bit less accessible for deaf people, but deaf people just love films, so they just came to this, and I barely had to convince anyone. It was great. I mean, it was a good experience. People enjoyed it. There was cheap popcorn, and it was good.
Great. And just to ask you, and what's coming up for your film club? Is coming up this month?
Notes from Cheapland is a little bit of experimental screening. I'm trying to spice it up a little, just trying to get to the feel for what people like. And so what's coming up is Marcel the Shell with no shoes on. No, with shoes on, sorry. So that's coming up next month. And then in December, we've got a Christmas film, if you want to call it that, The Holdovers. So we're very excited for that. And so the whole point is just to make sure that people got a selection to choose to see. Like, so Notes from Cheapland is a documentary. Marcel the Shell with shoes on is like a wholesome animated film, and The Holdover is that kind of typical mainstream with a great lead, Paul Giamatti. So if they don't like the other 2, they can go to 1, or if they like all 3, they can go to all 3. If they don't like any of 3, they should still come anyway. So
yeah, I love how you're both sort of choosing experimental, but also some classics to bring people in as well. What is
mixing it up?
Yeah, what do you hope for next season or next year? If you in a year's time, or what would your dream be for your film club?
My dream would be have these a monthly film club that no or a little cost to the deaf community. I would love to have like deaf directors in, deaf producers, or people to just work on set with that understanding of the deaf experience, and to come in and to kind of talk about what they do. That's exactly what I do with the book club. I get people, editors and authors and all that. I do all that. I would love to do the same for the film club. And I would love just once a year for the book club to read the book, and the film club to to watch the film of the book. And we also just kind of converge in that one like meeting. That's my end game.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Hollie?
I think, I don't want to say, the same, but similar in that I'd like it to be more regular and definitely established. something that people can come along to, and maybe even have a team of like community members who are programming it, who are leading it. So we'd like to continue doing sort of smaller film plus more classic films, and definitely raise issues that are important in the community.
Well, Morvern, how do we find out about? Is there a website we can go to find all these film club places?
Yeah, so the lead hub, I suppose, in the network, and also for local cinema, is Whale Arts, based out in Wester Hailes, who have their own community cinema as well. So there's a local cinema tab on the Whale Arts website where details of kind of the current programme are currently, and we are hoping to be releasing details of the spring programme kind of towards the end of November to start of December, before everything gets kind of really chaotic with Christmas. Just to pick up on that thing that Hollie was saying as well about kind of community members, I think it's interesting. I think that, and definitely an aspiration, I think some community cinemas in the network have got a bit more of that at the moment than others, but also it's kind of a slow process. As Hollie will know, kind of working as a community development worker, also it's about kind of long-time relationships and working with people. One community cinema that we're yet to welcome on to the network, but we will be next spring in the programme, is North Edinburgh Arts, who have been kind of outside their normal building for a very long time, I think about 18 months, maybe 2 years now, and are hoping desperately to be able to get back in by the end of this year. But North Edinburgh Arts are planning the third edition of the North Edinburgh Film Festival, and that's going to take place on the 22nd of February. And one of the things that they've been doing is working with a group of community members for a long time, kind of looking at different types of experimental film, experimenting themselves with making films, also working with Screen Education Edinburgh in terms of their archive, because they've got kind of a vast archive from now, but also when they were pelting video back in the day, and also doing a little bit of curation themselves. So yeah, I think there's like kind of varying elements of that when it comes to actually being community-led, but community-led is definitely an aspiration of all of the hubs and of local cinema as well.
So if you're a community organisation and you don't have a film club yet, can you join?
I mean, there is that. So as I said at the start, like, we are also, like, with Tomas and other, like, so we've been supporting kind of Queer Film Night as well, and also Love is Sweet, which is going to be having another screening in the programme next spring as well. Love is Sweet is like a new kind of initiative, just showing and curating films about Black love. But yeah, so we want to support people who are doing stuff in their first kind of year or so of iteration. We want to be able to, we've got little pots of funding, so we were able, as Tomas says, that we were able to support Deaf Action to do these screenings as well. And basically, if anyone has a need, an urge, maybe not a building, that's not necessary. But I mean, if you are a community centre and are interested in doing community cinema screenings as well, you can also get in touch. But just to get in touch with me, so it's Morvern Cunningham at gmail.com, and you spell my name with 2 R's, Morvern. And that's like, yeah, the best way to get in contact, and hopefully I can support kind of more folk. And it's also about kind of demystifying the experience as well, because I think often people don't know what to do and like are worried about like contravening licensing laws, and can get quite stuck in that as well. And just, I'm really kind of keen for more people to be doing screenings that cater to their local communities or to their kind of communities of interest. So yeah, I really want to be able to support people to do things. So if you have any questions, just get in contact.
Great. Anyone else want to say anything else about their experience?
I'll have to say that I know it's a BSL Film Club, but the most important thing is that everyone can come, like regardless of your experiences with the deaf community, or if you're hearing a person and never met a deaf person. Yeah, our model is to kind of make this a welcoming space for everyone to come and learn, also for deaf people to kind of like be comfortable in their space. That's really the key thing. I have people going, oh, can I come to this? I'm not sure if it's the right space. It's absolutely the right space. You just need to come with like love and respect for BSL, and that's it.
Wonderful, thank you. Hollie, anything else you want to add?
Maybe come along on Friday if you're available.
Yes, come along on Friday.
4 till 7 at the Crannie Community Hub. I think tickets are still available online. So do join us if you're free.
Thank you. So Thomas, Hollie, and Morvern, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Amanda. Bye-bye.
Hello, and I'm back, and I'm here with Blair Young, co-director of Since Yesterday, the untold story of Scotland's girl bands, alongside musician Carla Easton, who co-directed the film with Blair. Blair, thank you so much for joining me today.
Sure, of course.
And congratulations on your film. It's coming out, I believe, this weekend, but was originally was premiered at the Edinburgh International Film Festival, where I saw it. The film covers the stories of many girl bands in Scottish history that, as your title suggests, has largely been untold. The McKinleys, the Etts, Strawberry Switchblade. But tell me, I'm really curious about your journey in making this film. How did you meet Carla, your co-director, and sort of how did the generation of the idea come from?
Carla and myself met just on the Glasgow gig circuit, I think, very originally. And then I started making videos for Teen Canteen. I think we'd done a video or two. During the process of one of those videos, we started talking about female representation in music videos, specifically girl bands. And I think because we were both music fans, we started to compare notes on Scottish girl bands that we knew. And it just sort of spiraled from that. I think Carla suggested that she'd always wanted to make a documentary about them. And me being from a filmmaking background, that seemed like the perfect match.
Great. And yeah, I was really, as not a music, I love music, but not someone who's in the industry, knows that I didn't much think about the idea of female musicians versus girl bands, and then with us, girl bands are those who play together. So I thought that was really, really interesting from the very, very beginning. And Carla wrote the film, but you co-directed the film, and since, as you said, you have a background working with making films about large, well-known Scottish bands. How did you sort of collaborate in terms of making the film together? In terms of what roles that you sort of worked together on, or maybe separated. How did that work?
Yeah, in truth, most of the direction, it was very much cool. It was both of us. I don't think there was ever a time where one of us would just do something without consulting the other. I tended to write anything that I thought we should do. I tended to run by Carla. I think these sort of things work better when there's someone absolutely at the top of the tree, for lack of a better expression. But most of the stuff, certainly the writing, all came from Carla's side. But yeah, in terms of how we shot interviews, how we generated other material, I guess maybe some of the edit I had a little bit more input into, but yeah, overall it was just collaboration in the best way you can do it, which is just always bouncing things off the other person.
And your film really takes us chronologically through the history from about 1964 with the McKinleys to later on. Now, there's so many. Where do you start and stop kind of a story, and how did you kind of choose to pick the bands and sort of the topics that each one spoke about? I was curious about that sort of timeline and narrative that you structured throughout the film.
Yeah, that was probably the toughest thing. The just to take the second point first, I think the longest part of the edit process was us rearranging stories and working out, talk about what. And of course, there's way more in the interviews than we could ever fit into the film. A lot of people touched on similar stories. A lot of people had the same experience. And then, of course, there was the expert opinions and the input that came from people that we talked to who are in bands now or part of the organisations. I think we started off with I think the way it is, which is quite chronological. And we went through quite a long process of trying to chop that up a little bit. Just because it often doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like you've pushed things enough. Or perhaps it seems too weird to have no expert opinions until the end. So yeah, we did go around the houses a little bit trying to come up with a different format for it. But I think inevitably the one that worked best is the most straightforward chronological telling of it. But I'd also think things like, maybe we should have perhaps a way of dealing with each generation and each different band was to give them some kind of focus themselves. So at one point, the Sophisticated Boom Boom section was mainly going to be about the art of songwriting. But yeah, again, it just felt like everyone had too many stories that would fall by the wayside if we tried to get too clever with it, I think.
Yeah, no. And one of the things, obviously, that it really comes out is a great deal of wonderful music. Sort of, I got to experience maybe for the first time. I'm obviously not from Scotland, so I learned a lot. But a lot of lovely archive photographs and found film footage of many bands and throughout time. How did you? I mean, that's a lot to find, and I also know a lot of sort of about archive material. It can be quite expensive. How did you have an archive researcher? How long sort of did it take, or was it largely through personal collections that you were able to sort of bring all of that richness of the archive out in this film?
Yeah, it was kind of about both. There was an archive producer and an archive researcher. A lot of it did come from the bands, because these were bands who didn't always get a lot of coverage. So that there wasn't, you couldn't really just go on the internet and find material on them.
Yeah.
So a lot of the material came from either the musicians themselves or private Facebook groups that often had friends of the band or people from around the time who had been posting things just because they remembered they had it. So it was a little bit of a cross between everything. In our favour was the openness of some photographers of the time to really help us and not be limited in our use. Because other photographers, some photographs were then used just simply because they needed too much money. The moving picture archive was helped hugely by the BBC coming on board.
Okay.
There's definitely the least of that material, I think. Most of it still exists. There was quite a few performances by the band in the 80s. The Strawberry Switchblade stuff was all quite readily available and easy to know what there was, but not so much with Sophisticated Boom Boom and His Latest Flame. That really took some digging. Actually, some of that came in quite last minute, relative of one of the bands called Lizzie Doonan. We got in touch with quite late on, and they still had their VHS recordings from His Latest Flame being on TV at the time. And I'm sure we couldn't get them any other.
Amazing. Yeah.
They were just so hard. Either in the BBC, in the massive BBC archive, they weren't there anymore, or just the way they'd been labelled, it was too hard to work out what the programme was. But I think it goes back to the Kickstarter campaign a little bit. There was a kind of community spirit in gathering material for it.
Oh, great.
Who came forward with material, and we're very happy for us to use it.
Amazing. So you started with a Kickstarter. I did hear about that, but then, so was part of the Kickstarter, or it was just that you had these discussions with people who might have had, or access to some photos or stuff like that? How did that work?
It was a cross between people getting in touch and saying, "Hey, I've got this box."
Oh, wow.
Beds, perhaps not literally under the bed, but yeah, a lot of people had things that the clippings from the time that they kept, or audio recordings of gigs. That's gold. The bands themselves at that point, I think, started to think, oh yeah, I need to dig stuff out for this. And one of the best pieces, or not pieces, I should say, one of the best collections of stuff we got was from Jill Bryson of Strawberry Switchblade herself. She had this polka dot suitcase, of course, polka dot, which had so many contact sheets.
Oh, well, great.
Bunch of photographs. I think most of it probably never seen.
Yeah.
This is the stuff that Peter MacArthur, who was her boyfriend at the time, and one of the people that very kindly contributed a lot of their archive. This was all the sort of unseen stuff. So, like, out of all the photographs he'd have done from a session, you get one or two shots, which is what goes out into the press. But this was the stuff that was underneath all that. This was the contact sheets, the negatives, and other shots perhaps we'd just been experimenting, and we got access to all that in this one big, beautiful suitcase.
Yeah, I really liked to sort of seeing the contact sheets and sort of like the visuals of that as well. So I really felt like it had such a rich combination of different kinds of archive stuff, which fits with your idea of, you know, the wall and also the memories of the wall that you use. Which brings me to the fact that there's lovely sort of I would not reenactments, but you know, you switch back and forth between this idea of like the new generation sort of in their bedroom, sort of dreaming up being a pop star, and also using animation. So I wondered how and your sort of ideas around creating different ways to switch back and forth from the traditional interviews and the archive to these other forms.
Yeah, well, the very original idea was that we had, because there was quite a lack of moving picture archive and moving image archive for some of the bands, we thought, well, we need a way to counter that. So you can hear the music. That, at the heart of everything, was allowing the women to tell their own stories and allowing people to hear the music. So because didn't seem like there was that much archive, we thought we need to generate ways where you can see something engaging whilst you get to hear about the music. So I was certainly very conscious. I think we both were, that you see quite a lot of music documentaries and you barely get a chance to hear the music that's being talked to. And, you know, we probably didn't get to do it as much as we hoped, just with the time constraints. We had originally envisioned, let's just play a track for like 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And let's generate material. Let's generate new work that can sort of picture track that. But of course, we suffered the same. Well, not fate, but we had the same issues where you just don't get that much time to play on screen without someone talking. So the visuals that we did generate, the animation, and the stuff of who's actually Carla's niece, mainly. In the bedroom, that came from a combination of thinking, well, what's the best things that we can do along the lines of music videos, I suppose, and which also helps with the storytelling. And I think one of the things we kept coming back to was one of the main points of the documentary is that because these bands didn't get much recognition at the time, with the exception of Strawberry Switchblade, that material wasn't generated back then. They often didn't get music videos. And at the same time, the product of that was that young women, girls, weren't exposed to their music.
Yeah.
So we wanted to show that job. We wanted to show what was kind of missing. And that's where the idea of the bedroom came from. I think originally it was just something like a kid research and stuff. But I think Carla pointed out that the ideal, the most visual thing we could do would be a bedroom.
Yeah.
Where practically all of us as children express what we're into by plastering it all over a wall.
Mm-hmm. And dream up, what you want to be, which a lot, which a lot of we were, what was part of the discussion of many. So I noticed some of your interviews were together. So you chose a lot to kind of have the those who are are here today, still together and sort of talking, and also sometimes separately. I'm sure that's a bit of a logistics in terms of, you know, how and when you interviewed people. But yeah, I've just wondered if you kind of had a concept around, you know, filming two people at once versus, you know, one, or the ideas around how you did the interviews.
Well, I never wanted to do them as a group because at the time, actually, a lot of the interviews were done before we had any budget.
Oh, right.
So the one with the most people in it, the Hedrons, that was done in the most budget way. That was myself and one of the producers' partners filming. Julian Sinclair was the other camera operator on that. And then Miranda, who was on board as a producer, was the boom operator. And Carla was asking the questions, and the light kept changing. It was a bit of a nightmare, but it worked. But I had reservations about it because, being from a more technical filmmaking background, I thought you can't do this with one microphone. There's 4 people, and actually, people who are good friends will talk over each other. And of course there was a tiny little bit of that, but yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised by how well that one worked out. My preference was when we were at that budget level. At a later stage, when we had some budget, we had the sound recordist Margarita, and that made things easier. But by that time, most of the interviews felt right, either being just 1 or 2 people. But the Hedrons one is the one which had the most people and posed the biggest technical issues, but it kind of came off. And in truth, if you watch that one, it's so much fun because they interact with each other. So that if you can do it, you know, despite my reservations, I realized actually it brings a brilliant dynamic, especially in that sort of context where they're telling old stories and they're reminding each other of old stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that interplay works really well. And I from a interview and documentary background as well, I know your reservations and I can see that, but I think it does work really well in this film when they, you know, in special moments. You briefly mentioned, briefly discussed, you know, you had a Kickstarter, you have a lot of people see the final product and they don't realize all of the process of, you know, the funding and whatnot. But so how long overall did it take, and when did people like Screen Scotland and BBC come in, and did that sort of interject like energy or whatnot? I'm just curious how long this whole project took, because it's a big deal.
Yeah, it was about 8 years.
Wow.
In truth, well, 8 years since we first discussed it. And we just started filming interviews straight away. And I sort of knew that we should try and make those as good quality as possible, because worst case scenario, if you don't get any funding, which is of course never guaranteed, then you can still use those. And not everyone was. There was 1 or 2 that just, you know, you're working in low budget ways. The venue that you're going to film in doesn't always look the way you think it's going to. It's not as bright. You're next to a window, but it's not giving as much light as you thought it was going to. But in truth, a lot of the interviews in the documentary are the original ones that we shot with just research in our heads.
Yeah.
So we were conducting interviews as the research, thinking at some point we'd come back and hopefully film them again, but at the same time try and make them usable. In the advent of us not being able to do that. So we actually did that for quite a few years, and in the middle of all this is COVID. It didn't quite pause things for about 2 years, but it certainly made them more difficult for a while.
Yeah.
There was also a year where I think 2018, people, because of the trailer we'd made to try and attract interest, people thought the film was finished. And Edinburgh International Festival invited us to build a live show around the documentary. And even after they became aware the documentary wasn't even started, let alone finished, they were still into that. And it was a great thing for us. And they showed the appetite for the documentary, but it did take up quite a lot of resources that year. So within those 8 years, there's been quite a few years where we were kind of busy with other stuff, or COVID was in the way, and it was only after all that Screen Scotland gave us some money for development at a certain point. I can't quite remember the order of things now, but the Kickstarter was really because we thought, if we don't get funding for the full documentary, what can't we afford in kind?
Mm-hmm.
That was broadcast archive.
Yeah.
Another bits of archive that we were going to pay for. So the Kickstarter, which raised just short of £30,000, I think,
Great.
It was always about generating money so we could pay for the stuff that we couldn't possibly pay for out of our own pockets.
Okay.
But I think off the back of that, it became clear the appetite for the documentary, and Screen Scotland and BBC Scotland both came on board then.
Wonderful.
Which has started the dream.
Absolutely. And BBC Scotland is definitely it's a right partner, because like you said, you then now have access to their archive and whatnot. But what is your hope for the film? I mean, it's coming out in cinemas this weekend, and out for a bit across the UK, but it'll be going on, I would assume, on TV as well?
With the BBC involved, I suspect so, yes. I don't know broadcast date, but we actually might have to edit this part. Of course, the push is for cinema attendance. It's a film which seems to work really well in cinema in terms of audience reaction. And just to see these people and hear this music in that context is great. But yeah, there'll be a broadcast date.
Well, thank you so much, Blair, and everyone check out it's I believe on the 18th, this Friday, since yesterday, comes out in cinemas in Edinburgh and Glasgow, and hopefully many other places as well around near you.
Yeah, there'll be a list of them on a website somewhere, but yes, there's a good few screenings around the whole country.
Great. Thank you so much, Blair.
Thank you. Thanks.
So that's our show. Big thanks to everyone who was part of it. Many interviews this time. Many exciting things happening in the film community across Edinburgh and Glasgow this month. And are you guys looking forward to something coming up? Anything you guys are looking forward to?
Yes, I'm really looking forward to seeing The Apprentice, which breaks down Trump in a really sort of like manic, unhinged way.
Are you going Thursday night, as in tonight? There's £1 at Cameo on Thursday night, so see you there.
I'm actually stunned that I've not noticed that as a thing.
I didn't know
I can't go because I said I was going to go for dang it. I'm also excited for Anora.
Oh, I am too as well. Yeah. And you, Kat?
I'm hoping to catch some of their short film festival that's coming up at the end of the month.
Yeah. And catch us there. We'll be running a pop-up bar, the French Institute, so you'll catch me behind the bar. And that's it.
I will also come. What I was trying to do there was trying to think of a French phrase that would sound really witty, but I couldn't. So, au revoir.
All right. Well, we'll see you next month in November, which we'll be focusing on documentaries because it's the IDFA month, and probably many more great films to catch. So see you then.